My wife thinks we met by accident. I've spent 8 years hiding the truth. Original fictional Reddit-style story for narration. My wife believes we met by accident. At least, she believed that until 11 weeks ago. According to the story we used to tell people, we met in a small bookstore cafe on a rainy Sunday morning. There was only one empty chair. I asked if I could sit across from her. We started talking about the book she was reading, and the conversation lasted until the cafe closed. She used to call it fate. The truth is that I had been reading her Reddit account for almost 5 months before I walked into that cafe, and meeting her was only the beginning. My name is Aaron. I'm 35, and my wife, Claire, is 33. We've been together for 8 years and married for 6. Or maybe I should say we were married. She filed for divorce last week. I'm not posting this because I expect sympathy. I know how this sounds. I also know some people will say that Reddit accounts are public and that Claire shouldn't have posted things she wanted to keep private. That's what I told myself for years. But reading her posts wasn't the worst thing I did. The worst thing was using them to quietly rewrite her life. It started when I was 27. I had recently moved to a new city for work. I didn't know many people, and most evenings consisted of eating dinner alone while scrolling through local forums. One night, I saw a post about an independent bookstore that was closing. In the comments, someone with the username Paper House Blue wrote that the store had been one of the last places where she still felt close to her father. For some reason, I clicked on the profile. The account was about 2 years old. Most of the posts were ordinary: questions about books, complaints about public transportation, comments on local restaurants. But there were also posts about grief. Her father had died suddenly the previous year. She wrote about how everyone expected her to recover because enough time had passed. She described sitting in cafes on Sunday mornings because weekends in an empty apartment felt unbearable. I didn't know her name. I didn't know what she looked like. But I kept reading. At first, it felt like reading a diary someone had accidentally left open. I told myself I was only curious. Then I began checking the account every day. From her comments, I learned that she worked in graphic design. She hated crowded bars, loved old science fiction novels, and always ordered black coffee with cinnamon. She took a pottery class on Wednesday evenings and visited the same bookstore cafe most Sunday mornings. There was enough information to construct an outline of her life. I knew that should have made me stop. Instead, it made her feel real. One Sunday, I went to the cafe. I told myself that I was only curious to see whether she was actually there. I didn't even know if I would recognize her. Then I saw a woman sitting alone at a corner table. She had black coffee beside her and was reading an old astronomy book. 2 days earlier, Paper House Blue had written that the book had belonged to her father. I knew immediately. I walked past her table twice before finding the courage to speak. There really was only one empty chair, but that was because I had waited near the entrance until every other table was occupied. I asked if I could sit down. She looked at me, looked at the chair, and said, "Sure." The next part wasn't planned, at least not completely. I asked about the astronomy book. She told me it had belonged to her father. I already knew that, but I acted surprised. I mentioned an observatory outside the city because she had once written that she wanted to visit it. Her face lit up. She said she had been trying to convince someone to go there with her for years. That was the moment I crossed the first real line. I smiled and said, "I've always wanted to go." I had never heard of the place before reading her account. We talked for 4 hours. The connection between us was real. I need to say that even though I understand how it sounds now, I wasn't pretending to enjoy her company. I didn't fake the way I laughed or the nervous feeling in my chest when she wrote her number on a receipt. But I had entered the conversation with an unfair advantage. I already knew which subjects made her comfortable. I knew which jokes she liked and which memories I should avoid. I knew how to make myself feel familiar to her. Our first date happened the following Friday. After I got home, I checked her Reddit account. She had posted about me. She didn't reveal anything identifying.
She just wrote that she had met someone who seemed unusually easy to talk to. One sentence stayed with me. He listens like he already knows what I'm going to say. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt successful. For the first few months, I told myself I would stop checking the account once our relationship became serious. But whenever Claire seemed distant, I would look. If she posted that work was overwhelming, I would arrive with dinner and avoid asking too many questions. If she wrote that she missed her father, I would suggest a quiet evening instead of making plans with friends. Claire thought I was emotionally perceptive. In reality, I was reading the instructions. 6 months into our relationship, we had our first major argument. I had canceled dinner with her at the last minute because my boss asked me to stay late. Claire said it wasn't the canceled dinner that upset her. It was the fact that I had assumed she would simply accept it. I became defensive. She left my apartment, and we didn't speak for 2 days. Then she posted on Reddit asking whether she was overreacting. Most commenters told her I didn't respect her time and that she should treat the incident as a warning. I panicked. I created another account. The username was North Window. I chose it because I could see the north-facing window of the apartment building across from mine. I replied to her post. I wrote that her feelings were valid, but that one mistake didn't necessarily define a person. I told her to explain why the cancellation hurt, and then judge me by how I responded. It was reasonable advice. That was how I justified it. Claire responded to my comment. She thanked me and said my answer felt more thoughtful than the others. The next day, she called me. I apologized exactly the way North Window had told her I should. That account should have been used once. Instead, it became part of our relationship. Claire started recognizing the username beneath her posts. North Window was supportive without being overly familiar. I was careful not to agree with her all the time because I didn't want the account to look suspicious. Sometimes, I even defended her against myself. If she complained about something I had done, North Window might say that her boyfriend's behavior was inconsiderate. Then, as Aaron, I would apologize and change it. I told myself this made me a better partner. What it actually did was remove Claire's ability to decide how she felt without my interference. Eventually, she began sending North Window private messages. At first, they were brief. She thanked me for advice or asked what I thought about a situation. Then the messages became longer. She told North Window things she couldn't yet say to me. She wrote about her fear of becoming emotionally dependent on another person. She worried that loving someone meant giving them the power to leave. I answered carefully. I never flirted with her through the account. I never asked for photographs or identifying information. In my mind, that was an important boundary. Looking back, it was a boundary I invented so I could feel ethical while violating every boundary that actually mattered. 1.5 years after we met, I proposed. I already knew she wanted a private proposal. I knew she hated restaurant proposals and didn't want her family present. She had told North Window all of that. So I took her to the observatory we had discussed during our first meeting. We stood outside beneath a clear winter sky, and I proposed with a simple ring she had once described in a comment. She cried and said it was perfect. For years, remembering that moment made me happy. Now, all I can think about is how thoroughly I had designed it using information she never knowingly gave me. The worst thing happened shortly before our wedding. Claire was offered a job in another city. It was an excellent position, better salary, more responsibility, and the kind of creative work she had always wanted to do. But accepting it would require us to move. I didn't want to go. My career was finally stable. My mother lived nearby, and I had spent years building a life in the city. I was afraid that if Claire accepted the position, I would either have to follow her and become resentful, or refuse and lose her. When Claire asked me what she should do, I told her I would support either decision. That was a lie. She also asked North Window. As North Window, I wrote that career opportunities mattered, but a good life couldn't always be measured through job titles. I reminded her how difficult the previous year had been and suggested that stability might be more valuable than ambition. I knew exactly which fears to activate. Claire turned down the position. She told me she had made the decision because she wanted our life together more than she wanted the job. I acted relieved, but surprised. That should have been the lowest point. It wasn't. A week later, the recruiter sent Claire a follow-up email. They had increased the salary and offered to cover relocation costs. Claire was in the shower when the message appeared on her laptop.
She had left her email open because we had been reviewing wedding reservations. I read the offer. Then I replied from her account. I wrote that she appreciated the revised offer but had made a final decision. I asked them not to contact her again. After sending it, I deleted the message from the sent folder and emptied the trash. Until now, I have never told anyone that. Claire and I got married 3 months later. For a while, life was good. That is probably the hardest part to explain. Our marriage wasn't an endless performance. We cooked together, traveled, and spent entire Sundays doing nothing. I cared for her after surgery. She supported me when my mother became ill. I loved her. I still love her. But love doesn't erase what I did. If anything, it makes it worse. I continued reading Paper House Blue. I continued replying as North Window. Over time, Claire posted less often. I assumed that meant she was happier. Then, about a year ago, her posts changed. She wrote that her husband sometimes seemed to know things she hadn't told him. She described thinking about a weekend trip, only for me to suggest the same place the next morning. She wrote about craving a specific meal and then finding that I had ordered it for dinner. Things I had considered romantic suddenly frightened her. One commenter asked whether I had access to her phone. Another suggested checking the apartment for recording devices. I felt insulted when I read that. There were no devices. I had never installed spyware or gone through her messages. Again, I clung to the boundaries I hadn't crossed so I wouldn't have to acknowledge the ones I had. As North Window, I told her that long-term partners often became good at anticipating each other. Claire didn't respond. A month later, she began posting strange, specific things. She wrote that she suddenly wanted lemon cake, even though I knew she disliked lemons. She said she was considering painting our bedroom dark green, although she had always said green walls made her feel ill. She told North Window she wanted to spend our anniversary at an isolated hotel near the coast. I didn't realize these were tests. The next day, I walked past a bakery and saw lemon cake in the window. For a second, I considered buying it. I stopped myself. But that evening, I casually asked whether she wanted dessert. She stared at me for a little too long before saying no. When she posted about painting the bedroom, I made a point of not mentioning it. The coastal hotel was different. It looked beautiful. I convinced myself that suggesting it would seem natural because we had discussed visiting the coast before. At dinner, I showed her the hotel's website. Claire went completely still. She asked where I had found it. I said it had appeared in an advertisement. She nodded. Neither of us mentioned it again. That was when she knew. I later learned how her suspicion started. We shared a tablet in the kitchen. One evening, Claire opened Reddit to check a recipe. The login page displayed suggested usernames that had previously been entered on the device. One of them was North Window. She didn't know the password, but she didn't need it. The account's comments were public. She read 6 years of advice from the person she had considered an anonymous friend. She recognized phrases I used in real life. North Window and I made the same spelling mistakes. We referenced the same obscure movies. We were online at the same times. Claire printed 73 comments. Then she began testing me. The coastal hotel was the final confirmation, but she still didn't understand how far back it went. That came later. 11 weeks ago, I arrived home and found Claire sitting at the dining table. The printed comments were arranged in neat stacks. My first instinct was to lie. I asked what they were. She looked at me and said, "Did you know who I was before we met in the bookstore?" She didn't ask whether I was North Window. She went directly to the beginning. I said no. That lie lasted about 5 seconds. Claire placed a screenshot in front of me. It was the old comment about the bookstore closing, the comment that had led me to her account. Beside it was North Window's first activity from a year later. She had reconstructed the timeline. She asked the question again. This time, I said yes. I told her about the cafe. I admitted that I knew she went there on Sundays. I told her I had waited until the other tables were occupied. She didn't cry. I think crying would have been easier. She just listened. Then she asked whether the observatory had really been my idea. I said no. The ring? No. Our first vacation? I had read that she wanted to go there. The apartment we rented? She had once posted about loving that neighborhood. Every answer removed another piece of the life she thought we had created together. Finally, she pointed to the North Window comments. Was there ever a time when I was talking to that account and not talking to you? I couldn't answer. She asked if I understood what I had done. I said I had only wanted to make her happy. That was the wrong thing to say. For the first time, she raised her voice. You didn't make me happy, she said. You studied me until you could control the conditions. I tried to explain that my feelings were real. She said that wasn't the point. Her feelings had been real too, but they were based on choices I had secretly manipulated. Then she asked about the job offer. Not the second email. She didn't know about that yet. She asked whether North Window had tried to convince her to reject the original offer. I admitted that I had. Claire covered her mouth with her hand. She said turning down that job had been one of the most painful decisions of her life. For years, she had comforted herself by believing it had been her decision. Now she didn't know whether it was. She packed a bag and left that night. For the next 2 weeks, I sent her messages apologizing. She didn't answer. Eventually, she agreed to meet me with a therapist present. Claire said she wasn't ready to discuss forgiveness. She wanted a complete written account of everything I had learned from her profile and every decision I had influenced. I wrote 12 pages. I included the cafe, the observatory, the proposal, the apartment, and the messages from North Window. I didn't include the recruiter's second email. Even then, with my marriage collapsing because of years of deception, I was still deciding which version of the truth she was allowed to see. We attended 4 counseling sessions. During the 4th, Claire said something I haven't been able to forget. She said, I don't know which memories belong to me anymore. After that session, she asked for a separation. I created this account because I thought confessing publicly might force me to stop minimizing what I had done. I know that sounds ironic. Maybe posting here is just another way of controlling the story. Maybe I'm still trying to arrange the facts so strangers will understand me before they judge me. But I don't think I deserve to keep this secret. Claire wasn't foolish. She wasn't careless. And she didn't fall in love with a completely imaginary person. I was myself around her. I just made sure that myself always arrived with the correct answers. That is what makes this so difficult. If I had hated her, this would be easier to understand. But I loved her, and still chose control whenever trust required uncertainty. I took the natural risk out of being known by another person. In doing so, I took away her ability to know me honestly. That was the original post I planned to publish. Before posting it, I read it 3 times. I believed it contained the whole truth. It didn't. Update. 2 hours after I posted, I received a private message from an account created that same day. It contained 1 sentence. You still didn't tell them about the Seattle email. It was Claire. She already knew. The recruiter who had offered her the job contacted her again after she moved out. He was now working with someone Claire knew and remembered her application. During their conversation, he mentioned that he had been surprised by how abruptly she rejected the improved offer. Claire said she had never seen an improved offer. The recruiter forwarded her the old email chain. At the bottom was the response sent from her account at 9:14 p.m., while she had been in the shower and I was sitting in front of her laptop. Claire asked me about it in our next counseling session. I confessed. There was no dramatic reaction. She just closed the notebook in front of her and told the therapist that she was done. Her divorce lawyer contacted me 3 days later. I am not contesting anything. Claire also told me why she sent the message after reading this post. She said I was still doing the same thing I had always done, giving people enough truth to create the reaction I wanted while hiding the fact that would change everything. She was right. So, this is the complete version. I didn't simply monitor my wife's anonymous account. I used it to manufacture our first meeting. I became the anonymous person she trusted for advice. I influenced decisions she believed were her own. And when advice wasn't enough, I accessed her email and rejected a life-changing opportunity on her behalf. The account was public. Her consent was not. Those are not the same thing. Claire once wrote that the frightening part of grief was realizing the world could change without asking permission. I remembered that line for years because I thought it helped me understand her. Now I understand that I became another person who changed her world without asking permission. I don't know whether she will ever forgive me. I'm beginning to understand that forgiveness is another outcome I don't have the right to engineer. All I can do is tell the truth without adjusting it to make myself look better. And this time, when she chooses what happens next, the choice will finally belong entirely to her. Optional narrator outro. Was Aaron's relationship ever genuine, or was it built on manipulation from the beginning? And could you ever trust someone again after discovering a secret like this? Share your verdict in the comments, and subscribe to Thread Echo for more dark confessions from the internet.